Here's a question to begin with. Which of these statements do you agree with more? Errors are evidence that learning is taking place, or errors are evidence that learning isn't taking place. I'm Jo Gakonga from elttraining.com, and in this series of 3 videos I'm going to be looking at error correction. So I'm going to be looking at why you might correct, I'm going to be looking at what you might correct, and finally, of course, perhaps most importantly, I'm going to have a look at how you might correct learners' error. If you take a strictly behavioural approach to language learning, you might think that learners have to avoid error. They need to make sure that they know what they've got to do, that they get lots of practice of it, that they're praised when they do it right, and they're corrected when they make mistakes. Now, there aren't many people in education these days who would see learning like this as just a conditioned response. But error correction is a really important part of language learning, of that whole process. And I think that there are 2 really good reasons for correcting error. The first one is that it works. Simple as that, it works. There's lots of really solid research evidence to show that error correction is a very powerful learning tool. I'd really recommend John Hattie's work, Visible Learning, on this if you don't know about it. It's really, really interesting. And his work shows that feedback error correction is one of the most important ways in which learning happens. Without being corrected, learners' errors tend to fossilise and then they're difficult to change. And it's not just about correcting for the sake of it. If you make a lot of error, then for your listener, it's really hard for them to understand you. And that does cause problems. Maybe they won't want to listen to you very much either. It makes it more difficult, more of an effort to understand, even if those mistakes are small. The second reason, focus on error correction, and this is a big one, is that learners expect it and that learners like it. So they won't usually be corrected. If they've got English speaking friends and they're just talking in a conversation, those friends aren't usually going to correct them. It would be considered rude probably, and certainly probably a bit irrelevant. So in a classroom is their opportunity to be corrected, and they usually feel quite positive towards teachers who do this. Of course, it depends on how it's done, but I think that if you correct learners, they feel as if you're listening to them and they feel as if you care about their progress. This is really important. There is a but, of course. Language, as I said, isn't just about conditioned learning, and if we tried to correct every mistake that they make, especially at lower levels, they would never say anything. Also, it can be rather demotivating. If you correct a lot, or if you correct insensitively, then learners may end up just giving up. There's a balance to be had, of course, as in many things in life. But the balance may be further down this end than you feel naturally inclined to. I hope I persuaded you that it is a good idea to correct learner error. So in the next part, let's go on to see what kind of things you can correct, how you're going to choose what you could correct, and why learners perhaps make some of those errors.